So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Richa Goswami, the Global Head of Customer and International Wealth and Personal Banking at HSBC Bank. Matthew Chan, the Group Digital Officer, Jardine Restaurant Group. Sanjay Singh, the Vice President, CIO, Asia Pacific, India, Middle East, Africa, Procter & Gamble. And Anthony Dayton, the Chief Project Officer for Tamar. And also, I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Frederic Giron, the Vice President and Research Director at Forrester. Frederic, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Excited to be here with you today to talk about some of the latest trends, that we're seeing across the market in terms of digital experience and the digital experience economy. I really enjoy, I think it's the third or fourth time I'm doing this panel, moderating this panel. It's always great because we have, different perspective coming from brilliant minds, having different responsibilities also inside the organization, from marketing to technology, customer experience and business. So definitely looking forward to this this conversation. So I guess that the way, so we're going to talk about digital experience, but I'd like to come back to the past 12 to 18 months that we have been through as organizations. And Richa, Matthew, Sanjay, Anthony, I'd like to get your thoughts on, obviously we've seen firms push the boundaries of what adaptivity and resilience means in order to serve and engage with their customers. Let me start by asking you this question. What are the key lessons that you learned as a leader from the past few months in terms of adaptivity and resilience? And maybe Richa, if you want to chime in, and then we'll go around the room. Thanks.
No, it's wonderful to see you again. And thank you for having me. Actually, I was thinking about this, and for me, it's been an absolutely insane and incredible year. I joined HSBC during the pandemic. So if you think about it, I've come back to an industry I left 8 years ago, a company I left 12 years ago, and I've been working out of my living room in Singapore. So when you think about the new normal, I always think of it as being normal. We're just going to have to find different ways to succeed and different ways to operate. Couple of learnings, I guess, for me is there is no such thing as a superwoman and a superman. I think they're lovely in comics and stories, but we're all human beings. So, keep that, I guess, in mind as you try and go about doing what you have to do, because I just felt it feels sometimes really overwhelming because you're not in your natural habitat and you're trying to do things which are new to you. And I think it's, so that was the first thing, is just telling myself it's okay. And you can't just have it all and solve it all. The second thing from a resilience standpoint for me is less is more. I felt that there were days I wanted to do a lot of stuff, and there are everything's a blurred line right now, but I think we just have to focus on doing few things and doing them really, really well so that you can drive impact. And the last piece, Fred, before I hand it back to you, is as a leader, I think empathy more than ever is an absolutely critical must-have in your suite. Because I feel I think mental well-being is a real issue. I see it spoken about a lot more now than in the past. I think people struggle with not having boundaries between the lives that they lead. And you just need to realize that not everyone's sailing in the same boat. And I think, so that for me, I think was a big learner just coming into the role as well. So back to you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Richa. And I, for all the talks about digital transformation accelerating, I also see, talking to leaders, that there's a transformation fatigue, right? I mean, we've been under massive amount of pressure. So I love your point about empathy and being, making sure that we have the health, both physically and mentally, in order to keep on going. Matthew, from your perspective, what were the key lessons from the past 12, 18 months?
Thanks for having me right here. Yeah, because we are operating some F&B brand across Hong Kong, Taiwan, Vietnam, and Myanmar. And I mean, in last 12 to 18 months, lots of happenings. In addition to pandemics, actually, there are some political issues across several markets within our landscape as well. So it's lots of changes. So I think one of the major learning, the leadership team, including myself, is really have attention is with the guts to do the right thing. Yeah, because I think lots of uncertainty in market, how to really empower the teams to make decisions and take actions. I think is some things in a traditional business like F&B is issues. So we do lots of things to encourage the teams, including the general manager of each store, to have the guts and brave to make decisions. So is there anything wrong that will have potential issues about the safeties of the staff and the customers? We empower them to make a judgment, and we don't want them to go through the traditional legacy reporting line to get the endorsement approvals level by level, which will check down the response time, will have in some consequence that maybe we cannot really afford it. So that is a really big learning, because it's really take time to let the teams, especially the frontlines management team, they are aware of the importance of all these type of new changes. It's not talking just technologies, the empowerment. Even we say we empower them, do they really have the chance? Do they really have the brave to execute it, to use it? I think this is one of the key things that we really learn across different markets. And the other part is care about the people, including customer for sure, but the employee is a very critical part, because if they feel safe, if they have a healthy status, and especially the mental health, things can have the capability and opportunities to be happy. So we have a 4C programs to ensure both customers and employees are able to work or enjoy in a healthy status. So this is another thing that we further enhance, and it's really big learning for us as well, because we do think about we caring about the customer and employee in the past, but once lots of uncertainties coming around, whether can do more to further emphasize this part is something that we learn quite a lot. The third part that is more related to the business side is really how to really operate the business in an agile approach for the business environment that full with uncertainties. And that is something induces us to further accelerate our journey to move to omnichannel approach, to enlarge our team size and resources on the e-commerce part. And luckily that we make the change and preparation before pandemic. And the result is quite obvious when we really face this new uncertainty in last 12 months. So that is something we really want to keep on as well, because how to really ensure this type of ad hoc changes will become a kind of a DNA within the team for them to have the brave and flexibilities to react to coming challenge in the new world with really lots of uncertainty. That is something that we really want to keep on as well.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned about employee empowerment, which is part of the employee experience drivers, right? It's definitely something that organizations have been thinking a lot more about over the past few months. Sanjay, I believe that you also have a lot of great stories about how you have empowered your employees.
Thanks. Good morning, Frederic, and good morning, Anthony and Matthew. First and foremost, very much agree what everyone is saying. For us at P&G, the digital transformation or disruption has been the bedrock since before. Three things that we started to focus right from the day one. One, first and foremost, is employees. As Richa also said, and so did Matthew, everyone is bringing their best. And the other concept being everyone, interestingly, is the front line. And an example I'll give, our manufacturing plants, because we tend to think like, let's say the one in the last mile delivery or in the selling is the front line. If you think about it, the products need to get manufactured with quality on day one, right before you even sell. And how do you bring the hundreds and thousands of employees and taking care of them? Because they cannot work from home, they have to work from the plant. And they have to be away from their family from day one. So employee at the core and center is the first thing we did. Second, we are doing this for the consumer and the customer. And consumer needs to be at the center. Their lives are getting changed. And they want a different experience every day, their needs are changing. How are we going to learn that? They're changing needs every day. The new needs to be solved, the new business jobs to be done. And the last and very important, communities we live in, because this is the most important one. As employees and the consumers, like all of us are, they join together as community. All our interaction and intervention has been to digitally use the tools to augment this, essentially. That's what we have done, Frederic, from day one. Two examples I'll give very fast. One is the virtual consumer understanding, because consumer understanding is at core of every company and P&G. Every brand, every job to be done, we need to understand. How are we going to do that when we can't even reach their homes or we can't be with them? So what we brought in, which we had before as well, is using the IoT and with complete consent, really understanding from consumer homes their habits and practices and new issues evolving. For a mother with a newborn baby during pandemic, or whether you take the parents and how they are trying to work with their teenage children and their, let's say, laundry and grooming needs, etc. And you can go in healthcare direction, etc. And the virtual consumer understanding was able to give us far more real time on what are the new jobs to be solved and what does she and he need. And the second example I'll give is with one of the e-business partners. What we were able to do is create shop entertainment. It was a virtual shop entertainment where consumers can go into a virtual home and really select the products that they need at this point of time. So essentially bringing, again, coming back to employee at the core, consumer at the center, and communities that we live in, how is digital going to really bring that to life? That has been our journey.
Excellent. And I love how you stitch together this employee story and the customer obsession, right? And making sure that you have the adaptivity in order to pivot your business capabilities and serve these new, fast changing customer needs. We'll talk about this, for the future. But Anthony, what's as a leader, what were the key lessons that you learned over the past few months?
Sure. So again, a pleasure to see everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. So I would say a couple of things. I think the last 12 months have significantly accelerated digital transformation. It's like there's been 10 years of change in 12 months. So this idea that we can't do it, that is clearly not true. And I would give sort of two perspectives, and maybe building a little bit on what some of the prior people had said. Two perspectives, an internal perspective and then an external perspective. So internally, the way we work, I think it's sort of obvious that remote work is the new reality. We're not going to go back to 5 or 7 days in the office. We're going to have a model where people are working remotely, whether it's permanent remote work or as we move back to more in-office. But this idea that we can do work from our living room it's true. We can do work from our living room, but something has been lost. And I would suggest that there are two kinds of work. There's this heads down, asynchronous collaborative work. Mm-hmm. And I think that actually works better from your living room, right? No distractions, no office gossip, you get your work done. there's another kind of work, which is this team-based synchronous collaboration work. And that we've really lost over the last 12 months. So I think that work really needs to kind of come back, and we haven't replaced it. There isn't a digital facsimile of that. So that's sort of what I would say internally. But I think the bigger shift and the bigger change has occurred externally, and how customers experience the work we do. Because I think customers expect a kind of seamless experience from their digital experience, their online experience, to their in-person face-to-face experiences. And as those face-to-face experiences were forced to change, right, by definition, they started relying more heavily on these digital experiences, and we're finding them maybe lacking, and forced us as practitioners to deliver better online experiences. And at the core of that is really customer data. And I think one of the big shifts we've seen is a recognition on the part of industry that we must get a handle on customer data, really start to understand where our customer data sits, and sort of consolidate that customer data so we can create a single view of that customer across a variety of different channels. And last thing I'll sort of end with, again, I think, it's 10 years of change in 2 months. But in the positive side of that is it's really freed people's thinking. So instead of saying, oh, it can't be done, we put the perspective is it has to be done, and it has to be done now, right? We really have to change. So the old rules have been, sort of fundamentally broken.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. I truly hope that within the tamer hybrid work policy, there's not a policy saying that you need to work 7 days a week, being in the office or at home, even though it's true that sometimes we feel that working from home, it's nonstop, it's 24/7 type of.
I think that's exactly the issue,
yeah,
right? So
exactly.
And Richa sort of pointed this out as well. There's no separation between what you do, in your life and what you do in work. And so, maybe, in a way, everybody's always working 7 days a week. You do answer emails on the weekend,
exactly,
late at night. But on the same time, you can take your kids to school, or whatever it is you have to do in the middle of the day.
Yeah, here goes the work-life balance. So, but I wanted to come back to the point that you mentioned about the importance of taming this customer data. And now that I'd like to orient the discussion towards more the future, right? As we get and prepare for the next normal, as we'll get out of this pandemic. That's not a question of if, it's more of a question of when. But as your organizations prepare for this next phase of growth in the economy and next phase of transformation with your firms, one thing that it seems to me to be important to point out here is that we tend to believe that customers, is only one person, and this customer has a particular profile, right? And this customer has had to embrace more digital services, right? Because they were forced to due to the pandemic. But in reality, you still have at least 3 categories of customers, right? The customers that have been using digital services anyway in the past, and these guys are quite, they can use digital services, and we see them increasingly use new types of services like augmented reality, virtual reality. You have a second category I would define where they were kind of not resistant, but maybe only using digital services if they were forced to. And this group, obviously, that what really changed over the past 12 months, where they really needed to get into the digital, bandwagon. And then you still have a number of customers that, regardless of whether they're forced to do that, they don't have the literacy to do this, right? So that still creates a lot of complexity in terms of who you need to serve. And I wanted to go back to Sanjay's point, and maybe Sanjay, you want to start taking this question. How do you deal with this complexity? Meaning that you have different set of customers that have different set of maturity levels working with your digital platforms and digital touch points. And I'm curious to see how P&G thinks about the future from tackling that complexity.
That's very correct. Two things I want to share, how we approach this issue and how we have been working that in the last, even beyond 12 months, actually. This has been our technology-led disruption from beginning. First, I want to talk about the user experience at the core. And you touched upon a very important point, that every consumer or a customer is unique. And they need their own experience journey. And yes, we can categorize them into the one who can just take all the digital solution all the way down to what is going to be the helping hand along with the digital tool, and how can all these journeys come to life. So the first thing we have, which is a precursor to this, I would say, because you can create this when you have the big data. And what I mean by that, in P&G, what we have been doing and we have accelerated is our business data from across countries, across categories, across consumer segment, across manufacturing to supply chain is pulled together. Now, why that is important? Because it all starts from the business planning. And how do you run the operations with digital data coming together? And this actually enables employees working from anywhere. So it's hand in hand with how do we enable them to feel at ease that they can run the same drum beats, the same work, and they can deliver it better, right? And that has been the first part of this. Now, the bigger part of this has been the consumer experience stories. So I'll give you an example of how do we deal, and it's all across Omni. A consumer's habit is not like I only use digital all the time. I want a seamless experience, whether I go to an e-commerce or I go to your direct-to-consumer, or I go to, because there is no lockdown today or circuit breaker is not there, I'll go to a physical store, or I go to new channels through which I can procure the goods and services. Now, this has to be done at a very micro level. So just an example I'll give, take India as a geography, which is in my region from Asia, Pacific, India, Middle East, and Africa, which covers about 105 countries. If I look at India, the way we took all that information, including internal data, external data, and including government data at a real-time basis at a sub-geography micro level. Now, what does it mean? What's the consumer experience that comes out alive over there? Imagine a sub-geography where the consumer can go to certain shops to buy certain things. They can be healthcare needs and the healthcare product, but cannot do that for, let's say, grooming needs, right? And then you need digital services which are different. We created solutions such as even WhatsApp ordering or social media ordering. You got to start from consumer back to the store. How is then the store going to order different forms of store, whether it's an e-commerce is easier, but if it's a mom and pop store, how is that order going to flow to the distributor? From the distributor all the way back to P&G. And that's the supply chain, call it, from all the way from the consumer need backwards, and the user experience and options that you give, so that depending upon the different consumer type, they can choose. The other piece was the helplines. We have even found social groups in the communities who help each other. Such segments of population, they take pictures that I need this product, and somebody is helping them put that order right from a WhatsApp into, let's say, a digital platform. And last piece is replenishment of all of these. How is that going to happen at a micro level? So again, the same micro level data at a real time, how we have been doing is anticipating. And there are newer algorithms on anticipating from what is going to be the demand of this sub-geography. How are we going to put the inventory there? And what will be different models of transport available that we would be able to supply to that consumer need. So again, to close this, what I was saying is two parts to solve this consumer experience. When we start from providing the multiple channels to understand her need, which I talked before, but then to capture the demand. And the second part is, how are you going to enable this, which happens through the big data, bringing all of them together, right? And really making it come to life and use. And this actually is the bedrock of why our employees have felt, besides the digital tools available to them, which we have always been, like we have been on work from home for 20 years. We have just accelerated that more. But what is beyond that is the data and the tools available so that they can run the businesses and feel at far more ease than the situation allows.
Excellent. Yeah, I really like you know, how you describe this ability to be adaptive, right? In terms of sensing, getting the data from the customer, from the supply chain, from your partners, and then having the ability from a business structure, business capability perspective to pivot, right? To you know, change these capabilities in order to seize the opportunities that you see in the market. Anybody else? I want to open it up to you know, maybe Richa, you wanna chime in on this question of dealing with, you know, complexity in this digital sense economy.
Yeah, I think, you know, to keep it really simple, right? I mean, for me, it's there is no one size fits all. It's about one size fits one. Now, I can say that it sounds really exciting, but the truth is it's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
Right. And the first thing I always start with is with the customer at the heart, trying to understand why they do what they do, and what are the experiences that you can create that are truly delightful. I think frictionless, intuitive, table stakes, everyone talks about it, right? Because we really got to understand what are their pain points, why do they do what they do. So, you know, as non-sexy as it might sound, for me the first most important thing really is understanding within the domain of where that customer is. If it is really online or branch plus online, the truth is customers are fluid, and we love putting them in silos, but they do what works for them. I try to understand what are the key journeys that they're going on, and are those journeys delightful or broken. If they're broken, what do we need to do to fix that? And then bringing in an INPS score, a journey NPS score, and really measuring and making sure that, yes, actually, this has been the problem, you've solved it, and it has a customer impact. Because it's no use being busy for busy's sake and thinking you're doing all of these different things, but there's not the right kind of outcome for our customers. So for me, really simplistically, start with the customer, understand their reality, and then see what can you do to make things a lot more delightful for them. If that means fixing journeys, you do that. The second thing is then sometimes you've got to create new experiences. So for us, a very simple example, if you walk into our branches today, it's a much longer experience to sign up than if you would do it online. And online was pretty choppy, it was pretty broken. Customers you know, had to send a lot of information on faxes and stuff or whatever. But now we've been able to use technology. You can just, you know, take your a selfie, you can automatically have stuff filled out. So there's a lot more you can do with technology, which we are doing. But that still does not mean that there won't be customers who, when things go back to normal, will want to walk into the branch. So when they do walk into the branch, I need to make sure that that experience again is is an extraordinary one. So I don't think you can make a choice between let me do digital all singing and dancing and forget about offline. It can't.
Yeah.
You got to have them both to be incredible. So that's just, I think, how I look at it when we think of it for us at HSBC.
Thanks a lot, Richa, for sharing that. And we're still getting questions from clients, you know, even today, asking us how can we transfer, how can we guide our customers to go and use our digital services, right? Our digital channels, which I think is really the wrong question, because you can't control the customer. You can merely, you know, aim to inform them at the right moment so that they can choose your product and your services, right? Because it makes sense to them at that moment. It brings value to them at that moment.
Exactly.
So I think your point is really, really good. Matthew, I wanted to give you the opportunity to chime in as well.
Yeah, thanks. Putting customers as the focus, I think any B2C business cannot really avoid it. I want to add on one more point in this part is when we really put it in a business environment, how to really encourage and set a ground for the team to put it in the existing way of working. Because when a usual business, especially for F&B, is quite product focused traditionally. So even management have this mindset. I think that happened in lots of companies as well. how to really trade down to the middle levels, to the front line, to ensure that become something tangible and touchable for the customer. In the past, we can really make use of a offline touch point to deliver all these kinds of service. But once all these touch points go to a digital approach, even in terms of business strategies, tactics, planning, we will all have all these things on paper. How to really make it happen? For us, we have some haircut before as well. I think in last 12 months when we really deployed it. So really provide an environment that's safe enough for the team to test and learn. It's kind of a buzzword, but that is really important based on our experience, because we need to build a trust between the team with the management and the frontline staff about all these stuff. When you find about that will really create a value to the customer, really able to solve some pain point for the customer. Let's just test this out. Once it's work, we can really scale it out. The whole thing is not just time with technology, because I know everyone is talking about digital transformation, digitalization, but somehow digital is a buzzword. Somehow digital right now means for everything, because that is a fundamental layer, because different function, different business, they need to find a way to adopt them to cope with those new business environment that really full of uncertainty. So how to really create an environment for the team to have the brain to really test this out. And then once have a relatively solid approach, then technologies can help to further scale it out in a broader scale. I think that is something I want to share as well, because in the F&B industries, the general education level in the front line is still okay, but they used to a existing way of working for several decades. So really need to bring in some elements, let them feel safe before we push them to move forward. And that is something is really our technologies, and that is something I think the responsibility is on the leadership team, but there's too many discussion within the boardroom or meeting room about how to encourage all this stuff. But usually once we go to the frontline staff, especially for offline player like us, that is a big gap. Frontline staff won't able to understand the rationale behind without a safe ground, and the trust level, if not high enough, really will turn into a disaster. And that's why in the previous sharing that I do.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. I think it's. I mean, there's one. If I can maybe use one word to summarize, try and summarize what you said, which is really good. It's creativity, right? And how do you foster this creative culture? How do you give the permission to your employees to be creative? Which I think goes back to your point about empowerment a few minutes ago. But that's going to be absolutely critical, because in front of this complexity, right? So many customer segments, customer preferences, so many deep types of devices, platforms, channels. You need to be able to test, right? You need to be able to experiment what's going to be successful for your particular business, for your particular customers as well. So I think this creativity dimension is going to be critical. Anthony, you're doing a lot of work with your clients to help them harness the power of data. So how do you see them tackle this complexity with your solutions?
Sure. So at the heart of that question is the idea of data. And going back to where you started this conversation, which is how does the customer experience, how has it changed, and what are the expectations? But I think one key piece here is that customers expect a really seamless experience across different channels, across different environments. It could be different retail locations or different restaurants, depending on your business. And at the heart of that seamlessness, the oil that creates that seamlessness is the customer data. And what creates dissonance in those experiences is when that data is trapped in silos. And we've all experienced this. You go into one place and they have never heard of you. Yeah? You fill the form out online and you walk into the branch and they don't have it, and you get upset, right? It's when the data, we're in an interesting way as consumers. Our representation inside the organization is the data that travels with us. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question very directly, I mean, a great example of this is at Toyota Motors in Europe. So Toyota sells cars, but they also service cars, and they have very intimate relationships with their customers. That and those customers occur those relationships occur in a place. Mm-hmm. And one of the big challenges Toyota had is that they had 50 different countries where you could be interacting with Toyota Motors. And if every time you interacted with Toyota Motors in an individual country, it was as the first time you'd ever interacted with them, that would not be a great experience. And so, using Tamer, they were able to bring together, actually it was over 250 different systems worth of customer data and create a unified 360-degree view of the customer, so that no matter where you interact with Toyota Motors in Europe, you would have, they would know who you are, they would know what car you bought, what service it had, whether it needed, what particular parts it needed, et cetera. So creating that unified view of the customer across, and that's what creates these what we feel like are these seamless experiences that traverse our interaction points with different brands. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, thanks a lot for this, Anthony. So, guys, time is running. I think we had a lot of great, things that we can take away from this discussion. This empathy, right? This human centricity, be it from an employee perspective or customer perspective. Adaptivity in terms of the processes and the business capabilities, so that you can, pivot. I think Sanjay shared some really good insights there. Data, obviously, and creativity as well. I wanted to give you an opportunity to look forward, right, and make us dream, make us, inspire us with one big bet. Maybe one bet that you're making for the future as a closing statement for this panel. Matthew, you want to start?
Okay. Yeah. I would say there's no longer purely offline or purely online businesses. Eventually, it's talking about commerce. So how to really get the organization ready to serve customers in a holistic approach, no matter make use of data, so which is really a big help. And in terms of different type of digital moment of touch, I think that is really, really critical research. The response time that the team need to sustain, that is really a big change for lots of traditional business. At the same time, I think for purely online player, they will face difficulty as well, because the entire experience is converged to each other. It's just a issue about the proportion according to the nature of different business. So how to really get an organization ready to fit in this environment and adopt it. I will really bet on this part, because that is something so critical for a business to survive and maintain the competencies in the market.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anthony, what's your big bet?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, in the early sort of innings, the early moments, the common thing I would hear from people was, I can't wait till we can go back to the way things were. And I think the bet that I am making is that we're never going back. We're just not going back. We're going forward. We're going to a new reality, and I would argue, hopefully, a better reality. So this is not a case of trying to return to some prior state, but to take the lessons and in the good way, as I started with, 10 years of transformation in 12 months, take the good of that, which is we are all different businesses, and our customers' expectations are very different. And so I think the big losers are going to be the ones that try to go back to the way things were, and the big winners are the ones that are going to bet on this new reality. And then the last thing I would add, so then at a very practical level, how do we do that? I would give, and this comes actually to one of the questions in the Q&A panel, where do you start? And I would suggest starting with the customer. So that customer experience, and when you start with the customer, start with the data. Think about, what the footprint of that customer is inside your business, and do you have a single view of that customer across all the interaction points? I think starting there is you're most likely to make the biggest impact the fastest.
Excellent, love it. Sanjay, what's your big bet?
So my big bet is in line with what was just said. We are not going back. In fact, I would make a big bet we are going to go 100x further. Now, what do I mean by that? We may have just figured out how to bring all of these data and make customer centricity and user experience. I think the customer data and other data is going to get 100x more very soon. And the user experience it can create if we want to create, and the new jobs to be solved, to be discovered, is yet out there in front of us. Are we ready for it? Or are we just going to maintain what we got today? And I would bet for get ready for 100x.
That's an ambitious and very, very big bet. Thanks a lot, Sanjay, for sharing that. And then last but not least, Richa, what's your big bet?
It's a great question, and I was thinking, and as I was hearing all the panelists speak, and I think for me, when I think about it, and what I talk a lot about in the organization very passionately, is we've been a phenomenal brand for 155 years. But we cannot keep doing what we've always done and expect to be around for the next 155 years. And I feel my biggest bet is we can talk about innovator become irrelevant, and we need to, and innovation will come in some cases as an evolution and in some cases as a revolution, but it really has to be centered around the customer, as Anthony said, because end of the day, we're all in service of what matters to the customer. And I feel, in banking and even in healthcare where I was before, it's very easy when you are the dominant player to assume customers want to deal with you and they'll come no matter how good or bad you are. I think that's fundamentally changed, right? So I really feel it's going to be about customer obsession, understanding what matters really for them, and then going out and creating those incredible experiences. Sometimes it will need technology, sometimes it'll need human beings, sometimes it'll need empathy. But as long as you can co-create with your customers, I think you should be in a good place. It's a long-winded answer, but that's just how I
That's awesome. And
it's going to be.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And if I can share my big bet or my hope is that, we've seen amazing amount of innovation, amazing amount of creativity, adaptivity, resilience over the past 12 months. I would use, one term to characterize this. It's a pandemic mindset, right? And my hope is that we keep this pandemic mindset within organizations, because let's face it, there's going to be a massive number of big challenges that we're going to have to address as individuals, as organizations, as societies. So I think what we've learned over the past 12 to 18 months, let's keep it alive and let's use it to tackle these challenges. With that, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much to the brilliant minds on this panel. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. Maybe if I can ask you, my dear panelists, I think there's a number of questions that we can address in the Q&A box. If you can spend a few minutes, and to the audience, feel free to add more questions. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Frederic, and thank you to the panel for that inspirational discussion. And it's terrific to understand that that from the pandemic there could be some really good things to come out of it. And I certainly agree with Anthony that we're moving forward and not moving back. And I think we all have to take the view that that's going to be a good thing, and transformation is going to be a big part of that, not just for organizations but for people's lives and the experience. So it was great to have those insights from those CXOs who are really directly in their organizations impacting on the experience of their customers, and that's fantastic.